NTV's Eileen Eng has more.
California Governor Gavin Newsom reacted to efforts from a top state official trying to bar former President Donald Trump from the state's ballot. This comes after the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that Trump should be dismissed from the Colorado ballot for the 2024 election. They say he violated Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment. A majority of justices on the state court ruled that he engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the United States under their reading of the provision. The decision has triggered more efforts across the United States, including in California, to disqualify Trump from appearing on ballots in 2024. But in a statement issued on December 22nd, Newsom told his fellow Democrats that he believes that, in California, we defeat candidates at the polls, referring to lawsuits against President Trump, and that everything else is a political distraction. Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis, who is running for governor as a Democrat in 2026, sent a letter to Secretary of State Shirley Weber urging her to find legal ways to remove Trump's name from the state's ballot. The letter reads, "Based on the Colorado Supreme Court's ruling, I urge you to explore every legal option to remove former President Donald Trump from California's 2024 presidential primary ballot." Meanwhile, Senator Dave Min, also a Democrat, announced that he would introduce a measure to allow residents of the state to file lawsuits to block candidates who are deemed ineligible.
Top Biden administration officials are in Mexico today seeking the country's support in tackling the border crisis. This comes as two Democratic mayors speak out against illegal crossings, with one of them calling on the government to deport illegal immigrants. NTD's Arian Pastor has a border update.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Homeland Security Chief Alejandro Mayorkas are in Mexico City on Wednesday. They're seeking the support of Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, in tackling the immigration crisis. The two are expected to bring up a number of requests, including moving migrants south, controlling the railways that are used by migrants to move north, and providing visas and other incentives for migrants to stay in Mexico. This comes as new footage this week shows migrants making fires and sleeping between train cars in Mexico. They often travel on top of the train to not get caught by Mexican authorities.
Mexican migration authorities get us off the buses. If we're about to reach the border, we're returned to southern Mexico for no apparent reason. How are we supposed to move forward? We have to get on the train.
However, sometimes Mexican authorities don't stop the migrants, an issue the American delegation might address at Wednesday's meeting. Shortly before the meeting, President Obrador said the U.S. should be investing in poor people in Latin America and the Caribbean, instead of putting up barriers, barbed wire fences in the river, or thinking about building walls. Meanwhile, in the U.S., the Democratic mayor of Eagle Pass, Texas, says the U.S. should start deporting people, adding that the problem starts with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris not taking a stand on the issue.
It's very disappointing that they haven't made that message themselves, that you can't come into this country.
Democrats are raising hell.
And second, yes, of course,
New
there has
York,
to be
Detroit.
a consequence to somebody breaking the law. People know that they're processing them quick. That's why they keep coming. So until we start deporting people in large amounts, this will continue to keep going.
He adds that the influx of immigrants is causing crime in his city to rise. New York City Mayor Eric Adams on Tuesday suggested not allowing illegal immigrants to work could result in an increase in crime in the future.
If you have someone 4 or 5 months and said you cannot work, you cannot feed your family, you cannot provide for yourself, what happens?
What did you come here for?
Opportunities, an idle mind. It's a devil's workshop, as they say.
He added that it may soon come to the point where illegal immigration affects everyday New Yorkers. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Israeli forces released a recorded phone call that alleges that Hamas controls United Nations relief efforts in Gaza. Meanwhile, Hamas released a video that secretly recorded Israeli troops before an unexpected turn of events. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest on Israel-Hamas war and a warning: this report contains footage that some viewers may find disturbing.
On Wednesday, Hamas terrorists released a video of what appears to be Israeli troops recovering the body of a deceased soldier while other troops were standing guard. A terrorist inside a residence then throws a grenade at them and opens fire. Hamas also released footage of another terrorist inside a residence firing an explosive at an apparent Israeli tank. Hamas terrorists not only control the Gaza Strip, but according to a recorded phone call released by the IDF on Wednesday, Hamas also controls the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA. In the phone call, a Gazan resident explains that from the day Hamas rose to power, they took control of everything.
حماس حاطه ايدها على كل حد عشان تبقوا انتم فاهمين. حماس حاطه ايدها على موظفين الوكاله هم القيادات في رئاسه الوكاله.
After such a significant statement, the IDF officer asked him to clarify what he meant.
سيدي موظفين الوكاله هم حماس.
And when it comes to humanitarian aid, he said Hamas provides it to their own people first. We reached out to UNRWA for comment, but we didn't get a response before airtime. Meanwhile, Hamas security escorted this convoy of trucks carrying humanitarian aid, including fuel, as it made its entry into the Gaza Strip from Egypt on Wednesday. Israel's government spokesperson Eylon Levy said this on Wednesday.
UN agencies are currently struggling to distribute aid at the pace that Israel is inspecting it. Unfortunately, to date, the UN aid mechanism in Gaza has been woefully unsuccessful because it goes through UNRWA. Aid simply isn't reaching the people who need it because Hamas hijacks it and UNRWA covers up for it.
He also gave this warning about Hezbollah's continued attacks across Israel's northern border.
We are now at a fork in the road. Either Hezbollah backs off from the Israeli border in line with UN Resolution 1701 from 2006, or we will push it away ourselves.
Levy's comments come just a day after Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon fired an anti-tank missile at a church in northern Israel. The attack injured 2 Israeli Christians, according to the IDF. Then, when Israeli troops responded to the injured, Hezbollah fired another missile at the church, injuring 9 Israeli soldiers. Just after the attack on Tuesday, the IDF spokesperson accused Hezbollah of trying to drag Lebanon into the war Hamas had started. He said that if the attacks continue, Hezbollah will bear the consequences and responsibility of an unnecessary war, and it could bring unwanted destruction to the people of Lebanon. Jason Perry, NTV News.
Shipping operations in the Red Sea have finally resumed. Some companies remain skeptical. That's despite a U.S.-led international military effort that's working to protect the region from attacks by Houthis in Yemen. Danish shipping giant Maersk has announced that it's returning to the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. But some other shipping companies, like Hapag-Lloyd, are abandoning operations there. The German firm says that the region is too dangerous and that it will transit through the Cape of Good Hope instead. Since the October 7th attack, the Iran-backed Houthis have been showing solidarity with Hamas terrorists. The group has ramped up missile attacks on cargo ships they believe are heading for Israel. Relentless drone strikes force ships to stay out of the region, causing oil and gas prices to go up. And tensions over the Israel-Hamas war playing out right here in the U.S. Dozens of pro-Palestinian protesters were arrested after blocking traffic to JFK Airport in New York today. Joining us now to explore the pro-Palestinian protests and the rise in anti-Semitism, we have Dov Hikind. He's a former Democratic New York Assemblyman and founder of Americans Against Anti-Semitism. Dov, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So today, police arrested over 24 pro-Palestinian protesters here in New York for blocking traffic to the John F. Kennedy International Airport. Something similar happened outside of the Los Angeles International Airport. Also today, where about 12 protesters were arrested for impacting traffic. You went to the JFK Airport today to see the protests, but they were arrested already by the time you got there. Do you think this was an appropriate response from the police?
There's no question about it. You have a right to protest, even if it's supporting a terrorist Nazi organization like Hamas that did what it did to innocent civilians on October 7th. You have a right to protest. but you don't have a right to interfere with my rights, and that is, people trying to catch flights, people, we all know what it's like when you're on the way to the airport. You want to make sure that everything goes well, and you got to go through security. So for those who, block the roads, that's interfering with my rights. You have a right to protest, but you don't have a right to interfere with my life and what I'm trying to do.
And on Christmas Day, hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters marched around the Rockefeller Christmas tree here in New York, vowing to, quote, cancel Christmas. And that's despite New York Governor Kathy Hochul this week in her Christmas message condemning a rise in anti-Semitism. You mentioned that, we have a right to live our lives, but we're hearing voices in protests like this, vowing to cancel Christmas. What do you think?
Well, it's horrible, and the people that are involved in this, I don't know what they think. They are making enemies of a lot of people who see this behavior. They see people who don't give a darn about other people's rights, who don't respect other people's religious observance, and so on. It's sort of like anything goes. It's okay. You want to be for the Palestinians? That's fine. But when you are there for Hamas, that's a whole different story. Then you are supporting a Nazi organization. You are supporting an ISIS organization, and that's a whole different story. So as far as I'm concerned, they are dangerous. Again, I repeat, Americans supporting those who butchered innocent men, women, and children. And by the way, I'm aware of what's going on in Gaza, civilians who are being killed in the bombings. I get it. I understand. But where do you put the blame? Who's responsible? What does the world expect Israel to do? Just stop because Hamas uses the civilian population? Do you hear anything about that? Are they sending a message to the right place, which is to this terrorist, vile, barbaric organization? No. They want Israel to stop. If Israel, God forbid, would do that, and they won't, it is giving a victory to Hamas, and that is not going to happen.
You mentioned the civilian casualties right now in Gaza, and as we approach 2024, an election year, President Biden is facing increasing pressure to call for a ceasefire in Gaza as the death toll there rises. What's your message to President Biden, who, according to polls, is already losing support among young American voters for supporting Israel?
Well, let me tell you, President Biden has an opportunity for greatness, and that is by doing the right thing. President Biden knows full well. He saw the videos. He saw the things that most of us have not seen. So is President Biden going to do what's politically expedient, or is he going to go down for a man of amazing principle by doing the right thing? And the right thing is let Israel do what it needs to do. By the way, if God forbid, wherever anyone listening to this program, wherever you live in America, if hundreds of people were butchered in your neighborhood the way men, women, and children were butchered, the multiple rapes, I mean, the horrors that were committed, if it happened in your neighborhood, what would America do? So it is really perplexing and shocking that you have people running around in America who support Hamas, not the Palestinians. They support the Nazis. They're for the Nazis.
And lastly, before I let you go here, we've heard the IDF vowing just this week that this war is expected to continue for many more months to come. Of course, we are, like you mentioned, we are hearing calls right now for permanent or temporary ceasefires, and of course, the U.S. government also under pressure for that as well. Do you think the support for Israel overall is going to wane over time, even among the American public here?
Well, look, it may very well wane among some people, and that won't change the reality. The people of Israel are united. In Israel today, there's no more left, right. Everyone is united that the job needs to be done. And it is tragic that we're in a situation like we are. But there is no choice. In Hebrew, there's a word that the Israelis understand, ein breira. There is no choice. There is no choice. It's easy to sit back in America. It's easy to sit back in Paris or London and say, oh, they should stop. I wish they could stop in the sense that Hamas was already eradicated. But that will take a little more time, and it will happen. There is no choice but to get rid of these monsters. If we do not do that, we will pay the price again and again, and that's not acceptable.
Dov, thanks so much for joining us. Stay safe and Happy New Year to you.
Thanks for having me. Healthy and happy.